Well, in immigration news today, Ray Keating is an economist and a writer. He just published a piece at Real Clear Markets saying that Americans ought to toughen up and accept immigration because it embiggens the economy. That's not a real word, but they use it on The Simpsons, and so we are. Is it really that simple, though? Are there really no valid policy considerations other than enlarging our GDP as quickly as possible? And does immigration really grow the economy that much for people who already live here? All valid questions to be answered by Ray Keating, who joins us now. Ray, thanks a lot for coming on.
Hey, Tucker, embiggens, I love it.
We're rolling with it, Ray. I think you're a smart guy and a serious guy, but I think this theory is silly for the following reason. The underlying assumption is that all immigrants are the same. They're fungible when, in fact, they're not. The value of a software engineer is different from that of a laborer. Henry Ford is different from members of MS-13. It depends upon the kind of immigrants you get, and I don't think you factor that in to your calculation.
Well, I think you're absolutely right in terms of the contribution they make. I mean, we all make different contributions to the economy. So immigration is great in terms of bringing entrepreneurs in. Immigrants tend to be very entrepreneurial, more entrepreneurial than native-born. Young workers, young immigrants will help us in terms of people getting older, baby boomers retiring. And then there are people at varying skill levels that help out and are largely complementary to the existing labor force, and that helps everybody, and it winds up increasing productivity. So I think, listen, any economist worth his salt is going to say there are obviously costs. The point with the letter that we signed, 1,470 economists said that, immigration is a net economic plus for the country, and I think that's one of the few issues that economists actually agree on.
Well, I don't think that's an economic statement. It's a political statement, and I think it's a meaningless statement. A net economic benefit doesn't mean anything. I mean, because there are a lot of people who lose, and they are voters and citizens, and they are being hurt by a policy that helps another, and I would argue, smaller number of people.
Well,
it's meaningless, actually.
No, actually it's not. I mean, again, it's sound economics 101, and if you look at the economy, I don't want you to fall into that zero-sum idea. You know what I mean? It's not like the economy is a pie and we only have so many jobs to go around. What we need is economic growth, and that's what happens in the economy. So, this whole immigration debate is very frustrating from an economist standpoint. What we want to see, I mean, I would rather see a growth agenda so that we're growing so robustly that we need workers from all around the world to come here.
Like
that's
California.
What we should be focused on if we're really concerned about the economy.
So, but it's actually not an economist perspective, and I appreciate the kind of subtle patronizing as an economist, but you're wrong, as you know. So you can see economies across the world. Yeah, of course, as you know. China has no net immigration, neither does Singapore, and neither has been held back by it. California has massive net immigration, and it's much poorer than it was 30 years ago.
Tucker, our edge in the global, one of the key edges that we have is our entrepreneurial DNA, if you will. And the people that come here, immigrants, tend to be risk takers, right? You left your country, you came here, that's a risky endeavor, and that's why we see a higher rate of entrepreneurship among immigrants.
Wait, didn't you just say as an economist, and now you're talking about the DNA of entrepreneurship? Well, you're moving into theology fairly rapidly.
Am I not allowed to use some nice language? I don't have to be a boring economist. I can be a good economist. I don't want to be boring about it.
And we always welcome theologians here on the show. Just not when they pose as economists. So there's no way to quantifiably measure.
Oh, there are a whole host of studies. The National Academy of Sciences just did a study. Richard Vedder, who is a wonderful.
I would love to see that study.
Richard Vedder is a wonderful conservative economist. Did a study a few years ago for the George W. Bush Institute. I'd recommend you read that and maybe pick up an Economics 101 textbook along the way as well.
I hope it'll have a chapter on the DNA of entrepreneurship, because I'm sure there'll be lots of math equations in that one. But let me ask you this.
Yes.
Look, I can see part of what you're saying, which is there are a lot of energetic, smart immigrants, and I love them personally. My business partner is one of them. But I think that there are also a lot of immigrants who are clearly a net drain on the economy, who consume more in goods and services than they pay back. I mean, there's no disputing that, and you know it. So here's my question. Why not make an affirmative effort to import people with existing skills or wealth, and then we'd be much richer?
We can agree on, how about startup visas, right? Why don't we have startup visas like other countries do? I think that's a great idea to get entrepreneurial immigrants into the country. So we can agree on that. There's a whole host of areas here where economic common sense can take hold, and we can do some positive things on the economic front in terms of immigration. But the idea of focusing on, the notion that we're blaming immigrants for our current problems, you know what, Barack Obama was great at stopping immigration because our economy was so bad, we actually leveled off and people actually went back to Mexico.
Again, we're veering from economics into value judgments here. It's not a question of blaming anybody. No, hold on.
Well,
it's not a question of blaming anybody. You're not answering my core question.
Okay, what's your core question?
Why would a post-industrial economy such as ours continue to import people on the basis of family relations and physical proximity? If you live close to the United States but have no skills or education or money, you can get here. If you have relatives here, same thing. Why wouldn't we say we're going to shut that down? We don't need factory workers or ditch diggers. We need software engineers. Why not just import them?
I would say that we need people up and down the spectrum. I actually happen to live. Sure we do. Listen, I live on Long Island, and to use the anecdote, I used to drive past the local convenience store, and there were people out there a number of years ago when our economy was growing, waiting around to do work that native-born people didn't want to do. So
they
again,
don't want to do it at those wages.
Tucker, let's agree. The key is to get back to an economic growth agenda that you and I think, would agree on. Tax reform, tax relief, regulatory reform, regulatory relief. Let's get this economy growing again. And you know what? This immigration issue is going to go away, just like we didn't care about it in the 1980s.
I don't believe that's true.
We're going to get to the point where we say, listen, how do we get people into this country because we're growing so well?
Yeah, I've been listening to that kind of rhetoric for 35 years from conservatives in Washington, just cut marginal tax rates and everything will be fine, and meanwhile the culture has collapsed. So I actually don't buy that anymore.
We can talk culture too, but I thought that was theology and not economics.
It may be, but it's more meaningful than marginal tax rates. Ray, thanks a lot for joining us. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it, Tucker. Take care.